Oh, we got the cool guy shades on.
Always, buddy. I got a coat head on. Keep them covered.
So before we begin, I'd like to shout out US Arc. You know, they're kind of the lifeline of the reptile hobby that keep us going from legislation to anything else. They're a great organization to look into. How is your guys' day going so far?
Very okay. I'm continually trying to breed. It is the season and the time, and it seems like I got a lot of females ready to go, but my males are not so interested, and so that's a little tricky because you can't just force them to participate.
No, definitely not. Now you when we talked previous, you moved. You think the move has part to do with it?
I really don't. This is the second year in the home. I moved last Halloween. That was their moving day specifically. I had a separate moving company that was a lot more specialized. They're like 100-year-old moving company, and I interviewed quite a few moving companies, and this guy comes in. He goes, "We've moved reptile rooms. We've moved amphibian rooms. We've moved fish rooms. We've moved bird rooms. Trust me, we've got it covered." And they really genuinely did a fine job. But I was actually a furniture mover, back in the day. And so I'm used to job estimates, and I'm used to moving my enclosures myself. This is the first time that the collection had grown so much where I needed professional movers to go above and beyond what me and some friends for pizza and beer money could handle. And I said, I think we need somewhere between 5 and 7 hands. And this is probably about a 7-hour job. And he goes, "I don't see that. I see 3 guys, 5 hours max." And I push back. "I think we need at least 5, maybe 7 hands." He goes, "No, 3 guys will handle it all." I'm like, "All right, you're in charge." So 3 great, strong men show up, and it was a 12-hour move.
Yeah, I was just talking to a buddy of mine who's about to move a bunch of animals, and he was putting timelines on it. I was like, whatever you think, probably just double it.
Yeah. And so that was 2 Halloweens ago. So pretty much as soon as we landed, I got everything set up, and then we threw them into brumation, and they bred fine last January. I'm not sure exactly what's wrong, but I don't really think anything's wrong. I think I just need more time committed to making attempts, and that's all.
How many animals do you have?
So I've shrunk down my reptilian family. My long-term betta fish, she passed away. Her snail friend passed away. So I shut down the small fish tank. Just me and the reptiles. And the business had actually been growing successfully, but it's by no means in a position to replace my day job. I would need to, quadruple, pentuple in size in order for it to replace my day job. And a mix between the rigors of their needs and their responsibilities weighed against everything else I want to do in my life, which includes travel, finding the right partner in life, which, might not be, I need to sleep in my home every night because I need to do something for the reptiles every morning or every evening. Advancing my career, different opportunities. I need to find employers that are willing to work around the animal's needs, which has very minimal interference, but it's rarely absolutely zero. And so then to find an employer who's understanding, and you put all the factors together, even when business is good and the animals are happy and healthy. I went from, I think I was at 23 blue tongues and 4 different species, counting four different species. Now we are at 17 total and 3 species, one of which is a standalone Eastern. And I'm looking for the right female for him. But until then, he's just living the bachelor life and then the remaining 16 are a mix of Irian Jais and blue tongues, and everybody left is a breeder.
I some reason thought you even were a little bigger before.
No, I mean I've usually contained it to just one reptile room. They say you're not a true reptile person unless you've got reptiles in multiple rooms, and for a while I did, and it was really pleasant when I could just shrink everything from 6 feet here, 6 feet there, as opposed to going to different rooms. Or when I initially started this in my parents' house, there was tanks in my room, tanks in the living room, tanks in the basement. And so now I'm traveling 3 floors to, give water or food. And having it all truncated into one condensed space, at least for me, it's the dream.
Cool.
It definitely makes sense. You're able to manage it a little easier. And like you said, you got a lot you want to do with other than reptiles.
What about you? Because I know you've got quite an expansive collection. You also have your own home. How have they taken over, and how have you had to modify your home? I remember when I initially moved into this condo, the very first thing I did was bring in an electrician to appropriately wire the reptile room so I wouldn't blow a fuse. Have you had to do any modifications like that for your reptilian family?
Some we've done more so to better, others to make the flow easier. We got we have everything in one room. And with that, we got some air filtration, we got a sink that was added and one breaker we added. But other than that, we haven't had to modify too much. The previous owners had multiple outlets already in place. Is pretty good.
I'm a commercial space, so they had already.
You're in a commercial space.
Yeah, but here's the thing: you're gonna be jealous, and I know, I live in a real small little town now, like a teeny weeny little town in Missouri. So for like an 1,800 square foot building I rent, it's $550 a month.
Jealous of that.
Yeah, I just keep the animals there pretty much.
Yeah. How much time do you spend there a day?
All day. Yeah, I wake up in the morning and I usually kind of putz around in the kitchen for about an hour or two. And then honestly, at that point, I usually go to the building and just kind of walk back and forth all day, finding things to do between the different species and so on and so forth.
What are all the species that you carry, and are some of them more pleasure pets, or is it all business?
Honestly, I love everything I work with. I give ball pythons a hard time sometimes, but the color palette in ball pythons really is unlike any other species, so you're really unlimited on what you could do with them. A lot of the projects I chase in that species aren't exactly high dollar projects, but they're animals I enjoy looking at. But we have a big section for ball pythons. Our boa constrictors, probably between my new generation growths and my old generation, I'm probably around like 80 to 100 snakes. And then I do a lot of Australian pythons, blackhead pythons. We have a few womb ovulations this year. We have children's pythons ovulated this year. I think 2 so far. Striped spotteds are breeding right now. I do some like Costa Rican boa constrictor projects. All our colubrids are cooled down right now, and that's going to be Hondurans, some different milk snakes, a lot of corn snakes. And then I was telling Alex before we got started today, the blue tongue started scratching over the last couple of days. I also moved my collection last year, actually in late December, and they woke up immediately while moving them, even though it's only about 45 minutes in the truck. So my locks last year started on January 8th, where the year prior was, I want to say, January 26th.
Oh, wow.
2 or 3 years prior to that, I didn't start breeding till Valentine's Day. But I've had to do this in like 4 different states over the course of the last decade. So every year I think things are just changing a little bit.
What has made you not want to commit to one area, or do you just love moving across country?
Sometimes situational. I lived in Buffalo, New York for years, but I just never really loved it there. I moved back to the Carolinas because I just always really enjoyed the Carolinas for the time I spent there. That was the last place I moved before Missouri, and in between the Carolinas and leaving Buffalo, I lived in Cleveland, Ohio for a year. Do you know JMG Reptiles?
I think I follow their account, but I can't say I know them personally.
Good buddy of mine. It was kind of a reset year for me, and he had some health issues going on, so I moved in with him to help with the collection for about a year. And then once kind of things got back in a better rhythm for him, like I said, the Carolinas, Missouri, because a buddy of mine passed away, so I came out to help out and just never left. And since I've been in Missouri, I've been on 3 properties in 8 years.
Oh,
But
wow.
I'm going to stay here for as long as possible where I'm at right now. But inevitably, I would like a space where I could have me and the animals again.
Well, more power to you, and I hope the best. And, it's good to establish roots. Sounds like you've had a good time almost the last decade in Missouri.
Yeah, Missouri's an interesting state. I miss big city life, but it's quiet, a lot of nature, a lot of really wonderful herping in the state if you enjoy hiking. So, not somewhere I ever thought I'd live. I may never leave.
How close are you to St. Louis?
About 2.5 hours. I'm like somewhere kind of in the middle of the states, just below the Ozarks. So yeah, like I said, it's comfortable here. It's very affordable. Makes it really. There's like no regulations for reptiles in the states other than natives and venomous. So, and I think that's like a $50 permit every year if you want to work with either. But everything that we work with is non-native. So as of now, we don't do that.
Yeah, I enjoy Illinois. I grew up in the Chicago area, and that's where I'm at now. Illinois as a state, though, is completely anti-venom. You need to be a full zoo with special requests and special permits to get anything venomous, because there's not a drop of anti-venom in the state. And they don't want the responsibility or the liability to fix you in case, there's an incident. And so their solution is just broadly not possible here. Like, I'd love to get a Gila monster and take the chance, but I'm not looking to just blatantly break the law.
Yeah. And last thing I'll say, I'll let Alex, because it's his show. I'm not going to overtalk you, buddy. Having blue tongues, similar environment for like the beadeds and the Gila monsters, where I could have them in the same room, the same cool down every year. And that is a species I thought about maybe moving into in the future. But I think it would have to be one of those ones where I only get like maybe 1 or 2. I always joke around when I get something, I usually get like a lot of them, or at least 1 rack full. But that species, I probably just want to get like a really nice quality pair from a unique lineage and just be happy with that.
So I think you brought up an interesting point about the room and the environment that you create for the animal. You can mix certain species because they have similar needs. I had a Centralian blue-tongued skink, rather rare in the United States. And it's from Central Australia, which is incredibly, desert-like. It's very hot, very arid, very minimal moisture within the area, even around these oases you'll find throughout Central Australia. And I had it housed in the same room with my Irian Jayas and with my Intermedia, the Northern Australia and Northern Australian species. And between the island of Jaya and Northern Australia, it's a rather humid, not quite tropical for the Northern Australians, but it's reasonably humid. And so to keep a Centralian in that same room, even though the habitat was its own micro ecosystem, I was getting some humidity spikes, and maybe once every other year she would get sick, and it would be vet visits and it would be medication. And a huge reason I parted with her is I couldn't give her the needs that she needed. Completely her own space, one that I could strategically make much more arid beyond her own unique environment. The whole room, it was too humid for her. And sometimes you have to, take a loss or an emotional sacrifice because of what's better for the animal.
Now, how humid are you keeping your room? Because I've seen some people able to pretty cohabitate multiple species from arid?
In the winter, it's pretty basic, 30% or so, 25, 35, typical home. In peak summer, maybe it was 40, 45. And then on days I would add moisture to the enclosure and bump their humidity inside the enclosure, I'm getting a spike of 70 as it slowly settles down to 50, 55%. But at that moment, the room could be 60 or 70%, even for a little bit. For a Centralian, that can get into the danger zone when it comes to their health.
I'm guessing no, but did you by chance double check if it had anything underlying?
I would be willing to bet that there was some issues. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the story of how I acquired her. It was all done completely legally, but in hindsight and retrospect, rather shady in some aspects. They were legally imported from Canada, who had legally imported them, the story goes, from a breeder in China. And after they arrived, both sick out of the box and immediately getting them to the vet, and the presumed male passing away after about 10 days in my care, and working really from backwards, moving forwards to get the female healthy continuously, more questions start coming up. And it was pretty obvious that the Canadian care was missing the care feature. It was, a flip. It was a transaction with a lot of lack of love. And I think moving from China, presumably from Australia before, that they were not actually supplied by an in-house breeder, some smuggling story, moved to Canada. From Canada, they were not well cared for. And then they're shipped to the U.S. It's not so believable that they get that sick to the point of, intense medications and ultimately death 10 days upon my arrival, just from the shipment from Ontario area to Chicago. That it was 16-hour transit. Something's just not adding up, and it's unfortunate. You can only do so much.
Yeah, I did hear similar stories to friends that similar that you dealt with from the same place. One thing that people don't talk about too is, the conditions kept in while in China, the water given to them, if any water at all. I hear sometimes the water is so filthy that's actually causing some of the, we'll call it respiratory, or, typically a sign of respiratory with the animals. But yeah, it's just a lot of bacteria overload I hear along the way, and then the stress of shipping.
Yeah, you're 100% right. There was respiratory issues. There was dehydration. There was a lack of vitamins. They also had skin issues going on, a lot of bacteria on the surface. And, it was just all too much, unfortunately. And, lesson learned to anyone out there. If you think you want to go all in, financially speaking, on a little bit more of a rarity, maybe even a little bit more of a risky purchase, at least in my experience and other people I talk to, when you go all in like that, it tends to not work out. And then emotionally, you have these inflated, a perception that it's all going to work out because you've done your research, you think you've made all the connections, and you are all in, financially, or because of this opportunity, this once in a lifetime opportunity that comes up. And, word to the wise to slow down, really evaluate and identify if you're all in and something goes wrong, what could be the end outcome, the negative end outcomes, and maybe it's not worth the risk. For me, I had a great experience keeping them as pets, but I didn't get into breeding, and the cost to get back into breeding with the one I had, the next opportunity came 5 years later, and for about 12 more grand. And at that opportunity, evaluating giving them their own space, I was like, that this is a project for somebody else.
Yeah, it's tough. To be honest with you, I've always said that, I do love my Northerns. That's kind of always been my main focus, but the Centralians and Westerns are probably my dream someday. I like the blotchies, but just the body structure of the Centralians and Westerns as babies. I got to see them in person one time at a Daytona. God, it was probably in the mid 2000s, and I can still close my eyes and remember those little guys. But like you said, the financial what it takes financially to invest in a thing like that, similar to if you wanted to have shinglebacks. And shinglebacks, I always say the hardest thing about that investment is when I finally start producing, I won't want to sell that one or two babies I'm lucky to get that year. I'll
Yeah.
probably hold them back too. So it's definitely an understanding of a long-term investment that you may never actually get back, in all honesty.
Yeah, I think shinglebacks especially, it's really got to be a passion project more than a business, because the family bonds into this cohesive clan. And not to say that you can't separate them,
They've
but
been able to quite well, actually.
what was that?
They've been able to separate them quite well, where it's the family bond, somewhat of a story that they've kind of put onto
Oh,
it,
really?
where you can actually get the male to mate easily with others if you're offering them the right situation, where a lot of the people weren't offering the right conditions.
Yeah. So
Or
I also with you, Dave. For years, told the reason that we were unsuccessful in the United States is because they bond for life, and the stock we were getting in were just adults pulled from the wild, maybe, and maybe they couldn't bond together. But like Alex has said, I know of a few people in the country that have been successful the last few years, and they've all said the same thing. They've rotated males season to season. I think it was just a lot of wives' tales told in the hobby based on the stock we were getting in at the time.
So I wouldn't say wives' tales. I had connected with some people in Australia over the years, and they had experiences because they were cohabbing, and they'd go to separate a baby, they'd separate a pairing, and then all of a sudden the remaining shinglebacks would just stop eating. There would ultimately be an eventual recovery, but there was this immediate, visible, emotional downturn on their behavior that seemed more indicative of they were aware there was a change that they didn't independently approve.
Okay, and I could believe that
it's
about the
possible.
species.
Alex,
Was
what species are you caring for now?
primarily we have northerns and trio of blotch, but same as last year with only having one male that isn't the best breeder. It is more of a we'll see what happens when it happens.
Well, I hope the best for your blotchy season.
It's not looking well, but it last year and the year before we did it slightly different. I gonna change again next year, and we'll see what happens.
How cold do you go for their winter cool season?
So we've gone anywhere to 48. Talking with John and the other breeders, they've done anywhere from 55 to 45, and that might have been some of the issues some of the people had with shinglebacks. They weren't cooling them cold enough and offering the right warm up, cool up, and I don't even know the right what that is, to tell you the truth, but still learning on that.
It's still a fun process to figure out what works and doesn't work. And as long
Yeah.
as the animals stay healthy and you're enjoying it, more power to you.
So I noticed you had at least one pairing that went good. Did you do anything different, like in your cool down warm up introductions, or you?
So actually this year, yeah, usually I had gone a bit colder. I had gone to maybe about 67 degrees, and this year I kept it closer to about 70 degrees. And I'm identifying if those 3 degrees made a difference. That was the one successful pairing we've had so far in about a week of trying. And a big part of it is on me. I used to be able to make attempts 3 or 4 different times a day, not need to rush them. And now my day job is a bit more demanding, and I was also like really sick. Just before Christmas, I caught some crazy virus, and I lost 13 pounds in 14 days, and I was just left so exhausted. I was trading sleep for anything else in life, and that meant delaying their breeding opportunity. I was able to kind of wake them up on schedule, and I just couldn't commit to being in a position to take them out and supervise them like I normally would. Now I can. Now I've found the time, but hopefully I didn't just confuse them, as they're waiting around for 2 weeks while I become ready for them.
What do you think the 3-degree change will increase the receptiveness or?
So one, I'm on a higher level in my condo building, and heat rises, and so I'd really have to crack open a window and monitor that room's temperatures a bit more frequently before I could just shut off heat in my house during the day while I'm at work, and my house would naturally drop down to somewhere between 66 and 69 degrees. And now trying the same thing, my house stays a consistent 71. And so we've cracked the window ever so slightly, but you got to monitor it, because in Chicago, it could be 45 degrees one day and it could be 5 degrees the next. It could be -5 and windy. It could be 30. And trying to regulate the temperature of a room with an open window, you got to be cautious, because big temperature fluctuations can be stressful on their immune system, and we don't want to be, deliberately causing them any issues. I'd rather have an unsuccessful year breeding than any health risks. And I don't know if it was because of the cooling or just the stressors of pregnancy with any species, humans, blue tongues, colubrids, ball pythons. Pregnancy is taxing on the body. And I had a vet visit once a year, and it was, medications and tests and rechecks and revisits. Logan last year, she ultimately had to get her front paw, one of them, amputated. She got an infection in her toe, and it spread to the hand, multiple rounds of antibiotics, quarantining, and she just was not getting better. And so that was just last year's issue. And there was always one issue amongst, the 20 plus adults and the close to 100 babies that we produce. And there was always a different issue. And some feedback was lowering the temperatures into the 60s can be factorable on their immune system. And so this year I was more inclined to keep it closer to 70 degrees, because in Northern Australia, it's anywhere between 70, 73 degrees, maybe on the lower end, up into the higher 90s. In Indonesia, similar higher temperatures, maybe a bit more humidity. It's also hard to say because, we are calculating temperatures, at our level, or even a weather vane that's much higher. And the blue tongues, they're ground dwellers. And if, you put your hand down to the ground versus up high, even in your own home, you're going to feel a different temperature zone. And so I'm still kind of playing around with some things, but I made a conscious decision to keep temperatures just a few degrees warmer this year, hoping for healthier outcomes.
So I agree with your raising the temperature to keep them healthier, but in parts of Northern Australia, it does get in the low 50s and mid 50s during the winter. Like even Darwin, where a lot of the Northerns are from. That being said, we're talking multiple generations of captive bred that have been adapted to captivity, basically. One thing I did different is we actually offered heat throughout the winter.
How hot was the hottest point of the enclosure?
whatever 18% is on the dimmer. That's the lowest it would go. Probably 75,
Well,
80. It's hard to tell because where we are, we have lower lows than what you're saying in our room. Even like we could take a temp gun to certain spots and we'll be 65. The room itself is 75. If you factor that to the enclosures, that's where we started seeing some issues. Like maybe it was 2 years ago, we had a bacterial infection on one's foot, similar to what you're talking about, or sounds similar at least. Don't know if it's because of the cold or, and we even, I'm guessing you do similar. You clean out all the enclosures right before brumation and all that
Yep.
good stuff. And
so bring it back to temperatures. I mentioned I've done this in a lot of different states. When I bred them in Buffalo, I would remove them from the reptile room and bring them into my bedroom in totes stacked up. And I want to say it was, I don't know, I think it was like 27 animals, about what you were saying. And I would crack the window at night, and I think the nights would get into the 50s, and I was successful. The next place from there was Cleveland. The room I had them in, I was able to keep them dark, but I could never get them below like high 60s, low 70s because there was other things in that room that brought the temperature up. And then my next properties, I was actually able to get them into the 60s. This year, the night low might have been 70, but during the day, I think a lot of the days we had a warm winter. So I never really got a good freeze outside. We've had a lot of days in the 70s. It was 68 out today. They probably during the day, like I said, probably get up to 75 a lot of days. I guess what I'm trying to say with that is I got babies every one of those years. We'll see what happens this year. So I do think they've acclimated, multi-generations of breeding in the United States. I say the same thing with boas. They're kind of on their new season now. They're not in a Central American time frame anymore. They're going to breed, they're 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 generations of bred in the United States. They've adapted to a new season essentially. So, your year being in the way it was temperature wise, where in the past I had fears about that. One of the best years I ever had was actually my year in Cleveland, where I didn't get them as cold as I wanted to get them.
Well, I hope success for all of us.
Yeah. Well, sometimes, even like a lot of Kluber guys, when you speak to them in the industry, they'll talk about how they'll shut the lights off, but they won't really get them cold. They'll take them off food and just kind of shut things down with darkness. And then when they're ready to breed them, they'll turn the lights on and just start pounding with food and then get them going. So, like I said, where in the past I've tried it a lot of different ways, and based on what the old school guys told me to do, I thought it had to be in the 50s or 60s at night when I was sleeping. But, the reality is I don't think that's, we talked about that with Manny last time, which gives me hope this year. His best year breeding in Florida before moving him outside is when he had him in a room where
I
the
don't know if
sun
any
was
of you
hitting the
guys were
wall.
having some tag
Yeah, so
there, but my stream was freezing a little bit.
oh, you're all right. I was just concluding with saying Manny had success in Florida with a room that had the sun beating on it. He didn't. Oh, we lost him.
yeah, no
Well, it
worries.
wasn't a very good story, anyways. If you watched the last episode, you know what I'm talking about.
I got a question for you while he's loading in, Dave.
See,
We contemplated instead of putting the blotch in the like brumation box we made, so to speak, putting them by the colder wall where it's probably, if I touch it, it's probably 62 right now, so they would potentially cycle differently, maybe sooner. They might not, I wouldn't be able to get them as cold, but then they would be on a similar timeline as the Northerns.
so I don't know if you're going to be able to properly line that time frame up. I do agree with you putting them lower in the rack system, maybe against the wall. And I'm not sure where your heat panels are located on your racks, but I would probably move them.
Well, it's just light bulb.
Just light bulbs all winter.
Well, except for like when I took them out and put them in just like basically a CB70 rack, that gets cold air blown in it that's wrapped in insulation.
Okay. Well, I was going to recommend you moving the heat away from the wall and having that heat source in the tub, like as far away from the wall as possible, so they have the option of going to the cold side. I always talk about like my colubrid room. I know when it's time to shut them down, when the 82-degree hotspot in the back literally chases every colubrid to the front of the tub and they start hugging it because they want to find something a little cooler. But did you talk to Kim Lancy about that? Because I think he's the most northern guy that I know that's been successful outside of Johnny.
Yeah, I've talked to him on it, and I've talked to John, and the main thing, only having one male is part of the issue. And last year, just to see, he only preferred northerns. I didn't let him do the distance, but
That's fair.
whereas I did it slightly sooner, but he's in the mood, and he seems even a little less in the mood as there's more northern females not in the mood. I don't know, like if he's just weird or pheromones or overthinking.
Well, yeah, I think we've had this conversation 100 times before, but maybe cooling males down in a different environment where maybe you need to bring them up or leave them down a little longer. I think bringing them up a little earlier is better off. I think the male season could be a lot longer than a female season. But yeah, with the blotchies, I can give you opinions.
Yeah.
But I personally have not been successful with them. We kept them for a little while. But I think we may have been, we even tried it with their Easterns. I can't remember if we did with the blotchy, but the big vision boa tub, like the big breeder tub, we set up an environment where we cooled everybody together in that tub, plenty of space to get away from each other, in hopes that there might be some courtship through the winter, or at least when they come out, like, they'll kind of do it on their own in a sense. Because we had a lot of trouble standing over that species and watching them breed.
Oh, and we did bring up one female 2 weeks after the male was up, and the other one was a little, say 3 weeks. So we did space it out between the two. Still a little early, but based on the other years, it's hoping for the best, but no guarantees.
So I haven't. Welcome.
Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know why my equipment wasn't cooperating.
You're okay. We were talking blotchies and why it doesn't work for Alex. So this is kind of a silly thing, but and I haven't necessarily tried it with skinks ever, but like some snake breeders, they put like a male snake shed with another male in hopes to get them all riled up. Like, have you ever thought about maybe introducing your male blotchy to your male northern just long enough to get him pissed off, separate them, and put him in with the female and see if he's maybe a little more riled up?
Not that. We tried put him with a female northern and then pulled the female northern out and put the female blotch in, and that was the closest we got.
Interesting.
I've tried similar tricks of strange bedfellows and running interference before it's too late, just to get them a little riled up, and I found success with those models.
Okay, cool. I may try that this year. I have a couple males that have not bred for me in 3 or 4 years, and of course they're males. I'd love to see them breed at least once. But I've tried them. You guys are still doing out of tub, where I used to do all the breeding out of tubs. I had like 3 or 4 tubs going at a time. I had a feeling we were losing them again.
Well, he's here and not here. He's like entered as a different one, it looks like.
That might be the case. Did you just?
Well, here
There
we
we go.
Oh, nice. 2 Daves. 3 Daves.
Let me remove
3.
the There we go.
There we go.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
You're fine. I'm going to probably do it with one of my males where I try to get like a really dominant male and put it near the other one just long enough, again, to get them riled up. So like I said, I have one male that I've tried him a lot of different ways. And I stopped doing breeding tubs like 3 years ago, and I just been breeding in the tubs. and I've been keeping the males at the more lower levels of my rack systems just so I could stand over everything while I'm breeding. But yeah, no, I've had actually a lot of success with getting better locks in the male tub compared to introducing two animals to an environment and hoping it's not going to throw them off at first. But I did that for years, don't get me wrong. But the last few years, I've gotten away from that.
Interesting. So with the Irian Jayas, I have had a good amount of success putting the male in the female's tank and a lot less success introducing the female into his tank.
Interesting. Well, the logic is you did it right because the males are supposed to wander looking for females. It's not supposed to females show up on your door one day. So I'm doing it
Wouldn't
as
that be the
backwards,
dream?
but it's just working for me.
Yeah, I think also, there was hesitation versus comfortability. She's in her own home, her own environment, versus she's migrating to, his territory. And then there was a bit more intimidation. She's running away, peeing in the corner, showing the obvious signs that she's not comfortable and down with the game plan. And then you flip it around, put him in her tank, and she's like, oh, home turf. I feel good.
That's fair. I have a couple I do it the opposite way sometimes, home for different outcomes every year. But again, I just have a couple males that they're just meant for like these certain females, and it doesn't make any sense to do anything else with them. So like I keep on trying over and over and over again, but both these males are just very scared males. And the one male is the biggest male I own in the whole collection. Wimpiest male I own.
How big?
I mean, it's not even that he's a very long animal. He's just got that like really nice big head structure you'd want. He's not obese in any way. He's got like a nice lean, but like full body. I'd have to put him up, but I mean, I'm sure he's from the tip of my fingers down to like my bicep with his tail.
Oh, wow.
He's like 8 years old and he's never bred for me.
One of my buddies, he's local to this area. He doesn't breed, but he's got a few different blue tongues, and he is a Maruke that I think is about 34 inches long. Not obese, but appropriately girthy for such a lengthy animal. And, I thought I had a few big blue tongues, and this thing is just monstrous to another degree.
Yeah. I've seen some giant Marukis over the years, and I do have one northern female in the collection, but it was one that I picked up, not like a Craigslist thing. It was probably like some kind of Facebook group, but the lady had fed it every day of its entire life. So like it was the biggest and girthiest female you've ever seen. She's been on a diet for probably 4 years and has lost a little weight, but not a ton. And also is really not into breeding, very aggressive towards males, like never seems to be in a window. And it's probably just because she's such a large, still obese female.
I had a very large Irian Jaya female, and when I acquired her, she was blatantly obese. I don't know if I got the backstory or I'm just not remembering, how she came to be that massive. And it was about 4 good years of deliberate, smaller meals. Let's get her out of the tank, walking, and some exercise for her weight to drop down to a more appropriate weight for her. I want to say when I got her, she was like 28 inches and 3.5 pounds. And we got her down to just a little bit above the 2 pound mark.
Nice.
That's good. I wouldn't argue with that. Now, did you end up getting babies with any of your bigger ones?
So my very large northern, she's delivered for me the last few years in a row without issues. Big Mama was the massive Irian Jaya, the one that was like 3.5 pounds. She, in the years I had her, only bred for me twice. The second time I got some slugs, some unfertilized eggs. The very first year, though, she delivered prematurely, and none of the babies lived past 3 days. And it still is heartbreaking thinking about it. And there was, you can emotionally connect with these animals. They're very into eye contact and just vibing with you. And every year it was like a Vietnam War flashback. Like, please don't make me breed. I don't want to go through the loss of these babies again. And so I try a little bit. I'd never push her, and she runs away. All right, tapping out. That's it. And then maybe after about 5 more years, she bred again, and that led to our second negative outcome. But that first year, she was a very willing participant. And I remember her like looking over these really weak babies that were born about 30 days too soon. And she just had this look of, what did I do wrong? And that was my very first year. And, there's always lessons to take away, to learn and modify your approach. But I still think back, just a loss for her, loss for me, potential clients. And, always one of the best parts about breeding a live bearing animal is, maybe you guys, or at least Dave, with dealing with eggs, you can see, them coming out of the shell. I get so excited. I get such a big kick out of watching the babies physically being born, or just waking up the next day, coming home from work. There was not any babies in the tank before, and now there's new life in the world. To me, that's the single greatest, most rewarding experience out of breeding the blue tongues, is you get to, bring life into this world. They're really doing the work. But it's super rewarding. And when it doesn't go your way, when there's death and there's loss, sucks to a massive degree.
Yeah. I started with live birth with boa constrictors, and I said I never want to do eggs. I always just enjoyed live birth. Skinks, again, being a live birth species, one thing that I was drawn to. Plus, I've always just really liked everything Australia. But yeah, no, the eggs, there's still like a little thrill there, but it doesn't really compare to live birth.
Yeah.
I know it's hard to tell. Do you have any guess why, like, you've had stillborn or early litters throughout the years? Like, I know
it was really just that one. I really didn't have another experience. This was at a time, this is my very first year. So I had no history to go off of, at least personal history. And the business was founded in my parents' home when I was still living there. They were, vocally supportive. Little did I realize it was all just a front. And my father was petrified of the house burning down. So every day, especially during the gestation, whenever I'd leave the house, he would go shut off all the power. So no UV, no heat. And I think that was the single biggest factor why we did not have a good outcome.
Go do it, yeah. Yeah.
So after that first year, moved out, reptiles moved out, and I've had reasonably good success ever since then.
Well, and there's no guarantee with animals, even if, everything goes good, you get multiple pairings, you might not get, you might get slugs, With some of the animals, have you noticed certain males going on sooner location in your room at all? Like, say, the east side, or...
I really haven't noticed that so much, because the enclosures are set up where there's a deliberate hot side and a deliberate cool side. And coming out of brumation, before we get into the full summer months, there's limited heat and light hours. And they seem to, bask during the basking hours and settle back into the cool side during the non-lit, non-heat hours. I maybe, I just got to focus a little bit more. I haven't really noticed anything particular that you speak of. Is this something you've noticed?
Well, for example, like this wall, the sun hits that side of the building, so those ones seem to take on a little sooner, where, like, for example, this male here, he just got in the mood today, and we're basically done with the breeding season, so to speak. So there's some occurrences on that, at least for us, depending on where your reptile room is in your house and the type of insulation. If you have a center room in your home or apartment, wherever you live, it's going to have better barriers from the outside elements.
You're a bit of a first mover in the U.S. Blue tongue breeding game. I feel like you start breeding before most other keepers. What was the day you started the waking up process, and what was, if you're at the very end of your breeding cycle when this one male is first coming into the sport? From first day waking up to first successful breeding, and now how far out are we?
So whatever, the Friday after Thanksgiving to now,
Okay.
that many days. And on average, let me pull it up. And we did a little slower cool up this year. We didn't get our first lock for 2 weeks. Week and a half.
Yeah. So that's, why I think I'm a lot less concerned about my current situation, even though maybe I'm about 5-6 days, 7 even, from previous years. I think I just need to put in more time for better outcomes. And so I'm not concerned. It's, at least for us, still the very early goings of the breeding cycle.
How do you go on deciding
Hey, Dave, you're muted.
It's better off. Gave Alex a chance to talk.
So other than males being receptive, how do you just choose your pairings?
That's literally it. I first go to the pairing that I want, and if the male or the female is not receptive, I'll go to the next, most responsive skink, and it'll keep going down from my dream list to, well, whatever works. I do try to have a mixed offering of some classics, some half specialty morphs, and some more premium opportunities for the clientele, because the clientele, they want across the board. They want as economical and standardized as possible, versus I'm willing, this is my one and only one, or I'm a high-end collector and I'm willing to spend the dollar because I want something extraordinary, and everywhere in between. I think probably the number one thing the average client wants is health and reliability. But within that framework, some want a lot more of a standard, economical blue tongue, and others are ready to pay handsomely. And so you got to have an offering on all ends of the spectrum to attract the amount of clientele one needs to find forever homes to every single baby.
This one might be a little hard. Do you plan on holding much back in the future, or are you going to stick with what you have and slowly upgrade?
I have enough room for one empty tank. I have one empty tank right now. Right now, I would have to go back to securing completely custom enclosures to expand. I think the idea that breeding blue tongues could replace my day job, I'm emotionally past that, and I'm content with it being the hobbyist size that I can maintain both their needs as well as what else I want out of life. If I go back to, over 20 blue tongues, I think I'm just going to get overwhelmed. Right now I'm a single bachelor, but I do have aspirations on settling down and having the family life and making sacrifices for those other people's needs in your life. There's going to be a give and take. And, if my kids have certain needs, especially when it comes to my time commitments, they're going to take top priority. Right now, it's just me and the Skinks, and so I can give them more of my time. But I don't envision going back up to, a 30, 40, 50 plus blue tongue collection. So if I fill that one more tank, in reality, it's probably going to be one of your blue tongues, Alex, because you've got some really spectacular genetics going on.
I thank you for that kind words. What about and this one's hard because you can get attached to certain ones. You probably don't plan to let go current breeders to add more in next couple of years, or
I let go of quite a few this past year. Some went to other breeders, some went to forever homes that were just looking for an established adult. And I'm not going to lie, emotionally speaking, it was difficult. These are animals that I had raised since day one, or they were a bit older and they had been in my care for 10 plus years. And to say goodbye to them, I rejected a number of offers and buyers because I really wanted to make sure the home they were going to was quality, loving, and regardless on what happens in the future, their intent is a long-term, hopefully forever home. These are long living animals, and it's not always realistic to say they're going to stay put for 35 years. Certainly that's the goal. That's the intent. But so I was a bit more selective with identifying the right homes for the breeders that I parted with.
Now, with going forward, depending on the pairing you do, it might not be as hard. Like you mentioned, classics to more half specialty and so on. How would you label it once you get multiple lines mixed in, where you got 10 plus lines mixed in with maybe some classics to no classics?
I mean, it's probably just not going to be me. I parted with ones that I felt both I didn't have as much of an emotional connection with, and there certainly was the emotional bond, but ones that didn't necessarily fall into my vision for the future breeding project, which does include classics as well as some extraordinarily beautiful genetics. I always envisioned, at least for the Northerns, having a mixed bag of looks and characteristics. My initial project with the Irian Jayas was to breed for size, especially with Big Mama. But as I explained earlier, she just wasn't having it to be a part of that project. And so now it's just, what can I produce that outcompetes with the import market? I'm emotionally not a big fan of the Indonesian imports that come in so readily and are so accessible in the United States. There's enough captive opportunities where we don't need to remove from the wild. I think it's a bit stressful on the animal. And if there's opportunity to provide an alternative, I take pride in being that mover.
Do you think to choke out the importers, the United States breeder bringing their price down to what an importer would sell their animal for would help choke that out?
Yes and no. There have been times where I've taken a loss myself to secure the right home for the animal's sake. And at least for me personally, I just don't want to be in a financial position where I'm putting in the work to pay for somebody else's pet. And if a client is so concerned about rock bottom price, that really is their deal, they're probably not the ideal client for me. I have concerns if they're so concerned about rock bottom price and the animal has a need, a vet visit. Are they going to take the appropriate steps to care for that animal, or are they going to weigh financial consequences for themselves, surrender, or just ignore a festering problem? And so I want my clients to be in a financial position, not that money is no object, but the animal has needs, and I'm putting forth a certain level of effort. I always make myself available to clients. Shoot me a text, shoot me an email. If you want to just have a fun conversation, share an update, or you have concerns, I'm putting in my time to be there for the client, for the animal, years down the line. And if you don't think that's worth it, by all means, you're entitled to your opinion, and I might not be the right breeder for you. I'm happy to be there for my people, for the skinks that leave our home years down the line. And with that, I think there is value in my time and shared knowledge and being a support agent to those who acquire a skink from us.
I don't think, I don't remember exactly what you had yours at, Dave, your Erie and Giants, but I don't think they were tremendously more than some of the wild caught ones. I think you were great priced, and I do agree.
I've seen experiences of pet shops that order in, a number of blue tongues, and I'm speculating what they're paying with a mass purchase and the import fees, getting it possibly below $100 a skink to them, and then they'll market it for $400, and then it'll sit, and then all of a sudden the price will come down to $200. $200, I can't compete at that price, and then the animal will sit even more, and the price will come down to $150, $120. I've even seen import skinks marked at $60 in pet shops because they've been there so long, and the operator is ready to cut their losses and just get some money going, tank empty, and progress their business forward. And at those prices, I can't compete.
Yeah, I get where you're going on that end, especially some of the ones I saw that people were, I guess, trying to pass off closer to the captive prices, even though they were most likely wild caught.
Or maybe for anybody who gets an import, I always recommend, listen, if you really want that Halmahera and you can't find a captive Halmahera breeder, I get it, because there is a love for the skinks, and you should get the pet that you want. But have some extra money for a vet visit, for a fecal sample, for other types of testing, and be prepared when they find parasites, worms, other bacteria. There's going to be medication. There might be a recheck. And for an exotic vet, those bills add up fast. I'm sure both of you are well aware.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and especially some vets start out at a couple hundred just for a visit, it seems now.
Yeah. So I think it was probably like 3 years ago, I want to say, maybe 4 tops. I do believe that Erie and Giants were coming into the country for, I think, $65 landed. So like you said, pet store buying them, reducing their price back down after a while. And that price has been all over the place because, when skinks were kind of at their hottest, I want to say, what was that, about 8-9 years ago? The price on the import list actually went way up on that because the demand was way up on them at the time. So really that number has fluctuated a lot over the last decade.
Do you do any imports, or do you have close relationships with other people in the hobby who import?
It's that I'll be honest, all my friends are hobby friends at this point in my life, and they're from every aspect of the hobby you can imagine. I've had a lot of, I'm not going to name names, but just, a lot of people in the hobby, a lot of different levels. So I hear the stories, I guess is the way of putting it.
Alex, I don't know if you've done much importing, but you've gone through the steps to acquire the permits. Is that correct? And can you elaborate on costs associated with at least the opportunity to be in the import game?
So we did export permits, not importing stuff. Like, for example, like what we did with more CITES permits, but sadly the U.S. isn't letting anything in or out legally. Even with proper paperwork, unless you have a small % chance that there's something that Australia doesn't know they let out for commercial use. So, that being said, that was like wasted. I think import permits are like $100 and the other one was a couple hundred. So you're at, a couple hundred there. That being said, when my in-laws used to run a pet store, I know previously they were able to get some of the indos around 100 each, and that was not big numbers either, but those ones, like you said, don't always sell the best at pet stores, and they end up sometimes losing money because a lot of people tend to struggle with some of the humidity, even on the lower end.
Yeah.
So there was, there's always pet shops that are doing maybe something a little bit shady, and from the animal care perspective. And for some people, Petco and PetSmart could fall into those categories. There was a few very specialized reptile, fish, amphibian shops in the Chicagoland area, ones who I had a lot of respect for the operators and thought they were doing a really nice job by the animal, by the client. And I've seen them close down one after another. And it both breaks my heart that they can't remain profitable enough to stay in business, as well as kind of the message it sends on who remains in business and did they take shortcuts, financially speaking, for the animals and the sake of the business. In your guys' different areas of the country, have you noticed similar trends with brick and mortar shops, or do you have any feelings about that?
I'll say mine really quick. I'll let you go if that's okay.
Yep.
So the biggest problem I found with people I know that own pet stores don't anymore is a lot of people steal from pet stores. Employees steal from pet stores a lot. Sometimes just that alone can put some of these little shops out of business. But it's kind of a tough. I mean, there's so many different factors. You could open up your business in an area that doesn't have good traffic. Like you said, reputation could be bad. People might know not to buy from you. But I will say this. I've lived next to some of the worst pet stores you've ever seen in your entire life, and they've been in business for 20, 30 years. So the reality is there's always a lot of factors why some do and why some don't. I think a lot of times it's a lot of stealing within the company, and you really got to do it all on your own. Like that true mom and pop, be willing to be there 6 days a week on your own.
It's funny you mentioned the theft issue. It's not something that had really crossed my mind, but now thinking back, there still is in business a local pet shop, and they're not, reptile, fish, amphibian specialized. They take care of everything. And this is over 20 years ago. This is 21, 22 years ago. They were offering a service on you can bring your caged animal to us while you're on vacation. We'll care for it. It's one of the services they offer. And I had recently gotten at the time, maybe I'm mistaken, but for a 12-year-old kid, they were these rare German high orange import bearded dragons. And I had them a couple months, and then we took our big family vacation and dropped them off at the pet shop for the service. I come back, and the owner sits down, 12-year-old me, to inform me that one of his staff members had stolen my bearded dragons. There was multiple staff members working that evening. This is, day and age before cameras everywhere, so no evidence. He replaced them with some basic bearded dragons because that's all he had and all he could get. And those passed away a few weeks after the return policy, and he did not take care of me. And that kind of ended my time with bearded dragons.
It's fair. I always tell like the first reptile show I went to was in Buffalo, New York, and I was like 18 years old. I had reptiles all my life, but like I didn't really know about the breeding community yet. And the lady told me that you want to buy your veil chameleons in pairs because they do better together. But the reality is they do horrible together. They stress each other out. Their kidneys fail, their livers fail, and in the end, you have two dead animals that just lived a very stressful life. Which at first we didn't really understand why things were going wrong until we talked to our local vet. So yeah, like I said, some bad experiences that really turned people off in the hobby. Luckily, I loved it enough that I just couldn't give it up.
Alex, what about you? You're seeing brick and mortar trends, or you got any theft or misinformation stories?
When my in-laws owned the store, they definitely had some of their stuff stolen from anywhere from like people taking smaller stuff that's not too easily to replace, whereas they've had, like a whole litter of bearded dragons stolen, and I'm not 100% sure the exact what was like the final straw, but they, where we are for renting a place, you're at $1 or $2 a square foot. So their shop was $1,500 to $2,000 a month. So that's, whereas, like Dave mentioned, yours is significantly cheaper in Missouri. So those costs play a big role. The only ones I know that are still like ones around by us have a, snake discovery, but they got a huge following where that helps and they're growing. And the others been around for, I don't know, they're like one of the longest ones in the area, like Twin City Reptiles. They've been around for like 50 years or something like that.
That's great.
So, for the most part, decently doing good. There's a newer one in the area too, so it's looking promising for the future, but that's no guarantees. What about the Chicago Reptile House?
Yeah, they've been in business for a long time. As far as I know, their business model is stable. They're really not in Chicago. They are in sort of like Tinley, the big NARBC show for Chicago. It's in Tinley. It's in the South Chicago suburb. And Chicago runs along Lake Michigan. It's kind of like an oval-shaped city. And so I'm at the super north end. And so to travel the whole length of the city into some of the southern suburbs, I'm at an hour, 20-minute commute each direction. So I don't get there that often. Sometimes that's even a factor why I don't go to Tinley is the destination alone. But whenever I stop in, it seems like they've got a sound business. A lot of different offerings, clean enclosures, healthy animals, attentive staff. And to me, that's just the basic recipe for a successful business.
I agree with that. I think it's Metazotics opened a pet store, I think this past year. I want to say that's Southern Illinois, if it's not lower or not Indiana. I thought it's. Do you know what pet store I'm talking about, Alex?
No.
What's the name of it?
Clint Barkley Metazotics, like Metazotics reptile pet store might be.
Or is that one Wisconsin, maybe?
I think it's Southern Illinois, and then he has one in Kentucky now. But beautiful pet store. Guy's a big colubri guy. I do a few of his podcasts now and again.
Chandler, Indiana.
Indiana? Okay, so southern part of Indiana, right?
I got it. Exotic Meds. Oh, wait, no, that's not that. That's a different kind of blazing company.
Metazotics is in
Chandler, Indiana. That one?
Yeah, it's like straight east of you, Dave. Dave.
I am completely unfamiliar with this, so I appreciate you guys turning me on to them. I will. I'll have to check them out. I couldn't be any less familiar with them.
Yeah, Clint's a great guy, and honestly, I want to say his pet store opened up maybe 2002, maybe 2003. I was going to look it up as we were talking, but you know, everything from the presentation of the animals, the products that he carries, his understanding of the industry. He's a very good guy when it comes to like the economy in the industry. When he starts his podcast, he does Bluebird Radio. He starts showing like all the charts of like sales trends on Morph Market, how many of this species were on here last year, quarterly. Very interesting. I'd love to steal his idea. He just does such a good job at it. I'm not going to mess with it.
Now I did just check their location. They are over 5.5 hours from me. So
Yeah,
that would be a road trip to check that
yeah, I
out.
meant the other Dave. Sorry.
Oh yeah, no. Yeah, like you said, there is the potential of opening up pet stores and being successful, but you know, timing's everything too. Like, you know, we know the economy has been a little iffy the last 5 years. So, like, you know, if you open up a pet store 2, 3 years ago, that's a huge disadvantage if you opened it even 4 or 5 years prior to that. So, you know, like I said, lots of things. I think pet stores are tough. There is always a part of me that would like to have had that where the front half of the store could be like what's for sale and the back half could be your breeding stock kind of area. But right now I'm very contentious having a facility, meeting customers at the shows, selling animals online. But you know, when I grew up, man, I lived in pet stores. So there's always been a part of me that's one of my own.
Yeah, there's always that special experience. It's like a hands-on zoo. You know, you appreciate any animal at the zoo from afar, but at a pet shop, you might be able to hold them, learn something more about them, and then you fall in love with the hobby. You know, I think a lot of it, the educational and the kind of the dreamer aspect of it starts in adolescence, getting those kids hooked early. Dave, do you allow clients, the general public, or would you ever like host a kid's birthday party at your facility?
And nothing that cool, man. I will be honest, I do keep it a little low key just out of fear of the wrong person knowing. You know, I'm literally like almost like in the middle of this little downtown, a little area, and I don't think anybody even knows what I'm doing yet, other than the person behind me and my landlord. Um, I do and have done birthday parties in the past, but that's mainly just been like my friends' kids. I'll go and bring some animals with, just kind of talk to them. But I've always had like, well, first off, I don't mean to judge me, but I don't know if I'd hire me for my kid's birthday party. You know, I think, you know, where, you know, I really enjoy kids. I always interact with them well. Like, you know, but there are stereotypes out there, and you just don't invite the bearded guy into your house to show off stuff. You gotta establish yourself. You know, if I was maybe a little more clean cut, but I'll be honest, even without the beard, I'm pretty creepy looking.
There's a gecko
You think
store.
so? I wouldn't go there. I think you're beautiful, Dave.
Well, I appreciate that. And, you know, that's probably because we look similar because we're Daves. I'm not trying to bring you down to my level, but
Dave's of the tribe.
Dave's in the tribe. Do you know Colorado, Dave?
Maybe
Yeah.
the one who had the Centralians he recently put up for sale.
He put them up for sale?
Yeah, that was when I said, you know, I had waited about 5 years for another opportunity. And it was going to be about $12,000 more to get another couple. And, you know, that was the opportunity, and I voluntarily passed. So when he had the Centralians, we were trading notes here and there, because he also acquired them from the same source I got mine. And he, you know, when mine came in sick, and then the male died, and, you know, the female was on such a long recovery to wellness, and he couldn't have been any more dismissive of the issues, and couldn't take any less accountability. So at that point, I blasted him on social media. And then so David got in touch with me, and he goes, "Hey, I'm about to give this guy some money for some Tralians. I want to hear from you what's really going on." And I said, "If you're going to do this, which I don't recommend, you better be on his ass every day. I want to see photos, videos of them feeding, drinking, you know, behaving normally." And he did. He held this counterpart accountable until shipping day, and he ultimately had a much better outcome than I did.
So I like Dave a lot. I've known him for years. I've actually been to his place to hold those animals. Probably the only 2 times I've ever been able to hold Centralians is when Brian Barczyk got his in from Bill Brandt years ago. I got to see him at the Tinley show, and then of course being at Dave's house. But I will say those animals at his place, absolutely beautiful. Look like they were in great shape. Like, I'm glad that his experience went well because, he really did truly love those, probably as much as you loved yours, of course. And it really could have went the wrong way considering the source.
Yeah.
But yeah, United States, man, like there might only be, how many keepers do you think we have in the United States that actually have a pair of Centrillions?
I think there's that I'm aware of. I was one of 5.
Oh yeah, I was
So
going to say 5.
But I have been to a couple zoos. I want to say it was even years ago. I was at the St. Louis Zoo and I saw a Centralian there. Is this a loner animal or a permanent resident? I don't know. But there's been 2 zoos nationwide where I have seen a single Centralian at.
Okay. So did you make it to this past Tinley?
I did not.
So there was a breeder there, actually had an adult female shingleback on his table that actually came from a zoo. Apparently it was just in their gift shop for 4 years. And then eventually they contacted him to buy the animal. And, it's very rare you get a phone call like that. So of course he did pick it up.
Yeah. I did see photos of the shingleback there. And, it was nice to just see them out in the hobby. Because I get the reason why if somebody has them, especially, not that I would encourage it if they had broken the law to acquire those animals, but it's tough seeing, just knowing that they are out there, but under such lock and key that I'll never even get to have the experience to hold them, to bond, to interact, even if I don't get to own them myself. As you said, it's both a dream pet, but it's also a big financial burden to acquire them because of their exclusivity.
Yeah, what if in 5 years the cost is half the price?
I mean, for me, the Western shingleback, especially a high orange Western shingleback, that would be my dream pet to cash in on real savings for that pleasure animal, whether I get into breeding or not.
So I don't think that will be half the price, being you don't see many of those in the U.S., but there's a bit around and more people are being successful.
Yeah, I really hope that for those that are in the country, especially the ones that came here legally and sound, that the keepers do find success breeding and have a willingness to part with the animal. Because to me, that would be the ultimate pleasure pet that would be worthwhile to pay up the asking price for.
So the silly thing about all this is in the next, let's say 10 years from now, there may be more shinglebacks available in the United States than Centrillions and Westerns.
I would believe that 100%.
Yeah.
So I would say, yes, there's going to be more than the Centralians, but there's a bit of Westerns around.
Yeah, there was a while I was seeing like adults popping up in different collections. A couple ball python guys even had some they were selling, but it's been a while. Maybe I'm not paying enough attention.
There was a pair up recently on Morph Market.
The other thing is I feel like a lot of the shinglebacks I see available in the U.S. market are the Asperas. I could be mispronouncing that, but they're the more melanistic ones. And I really like the Westerns with the touches of orange in their skin. And if I'm going to be paying, 5 figures for an animal, I'm getting what I want at that point.
I don't know exactly all the different ones that we have for sure in the United States right now that people are successful breeding, but some of the ones I have seen in a collection actually had were the ones that have like almost like some bluish tones to them.
Ooh.
So some of the Westerns do. Like John posted one of his that's got some hues of blue to it.
Right. And he probably received it from the gentleman I'm speaking of. But like I said, I have seen the ones like you're saying, just really, ship brown or just like a really dark black. Really nothing wonderful, just structurally so neat, but just no color palette, I guess. Like I love the Goldfield stuff. I like that dark brown, that white, and that orange look. I got one of Emily Burke's drawings on my wall of one of the Goldfields. Always been my favorite.
Nice.
But like I said, I do know there are some of those in the United States too, like you were saying. And, there's always a sneaky guy out in California you don't know about that's got a small collection like this. And literally you hear about it like 2 decades later.
Well, and that's the hard part on a lot of this. Not everyone wants to talk about it, and some of the people, um,
Yeah, what
this
John's doing, it's God bless his heart. It's incredible, his collection, and being so open about it. I hope nothing but tremendous success for him. I really like what he's doing, both for the hobby as well as I'm seeing the treatment of the animals, and I couldn't be more positively receptive to what he's doing.
No, I agree with you. Yeah, no, so when we talk about like certain concerns, Alex, like you were talking about, like, the likelihood of us being able to export these animals anytime soon, if ever again, I don't necessarily know if that's going to happen. And we all know that the importing has been completely cut off to where we don't even get animals in from Canada anymore. The likelihood of somebody in the United States maybe getting hassled, I think goes way down when these animals are not being sent out of country.
Well, and there's so many multiple years of generations, even on the rarer ones, that I've been able to track, and I'm just, an idiot in a wheelchair, and I can track them down decades. So they've been here.
Fair.
My feeling on the law in curbing behaviors, especially when they were legal, importing and exporting, it stems from those in power are not reptile people, and a special interest group lobbies, gives the check, and then all of a sudden policy changes. What we really need is somebody from the hobby in the big seat who says, I understand this a little bit more, because I feel like those in power that make decisions have never been reptile people. And they're the ones who make the decisions that impact the legality of our interests and our business.
I think it's always impact on the economy. And I think that's always the argument of just the amount of money that like Florida's had to put into the issues they have with all the invasives. I think that's one of the hardest arguments too in this, because like you said, people in government that might not be familiar with the hobby the way they should be, with zero basic understanding. I mean, you probably remember I don't know if it was Discovery Channel. There were shows where we would talk about Burmese pythons making it all the way up to the Ohio River. Never was going to happen. But people I talked to, strangers, would tell me about how they watched that on TV one time. But no, I think if anything, us being under the radar is the best thing for us at this point. I think the more on the radar we become, I only think there'll be more laws than less regulation.
I'm curious, when you were in the Carolinas, did you happen to see wild tegu there?
I was not lucky enough to see. I was in Charlotte, and I'm not sure if that's more of like a coastal thing or like a little further down towards the coast. I don't know. I don't know exactly what their true range is, but I do believe that you could keep them outdoors in the Carolinas successfully, and they have brood made underground and come out every year successfully. Are there populations known in South Carolina? I've heard Georgia and Louisiana.
I've heard some that are being captured in South Carolina.
South Carolina?
Yeah, and it's not often. Illinois, which, we get the full winter just like your other Midwestern states, but all the way up to central Illinois, Peoria, Springfield area, they're getting armadillo in the summer. These armadillo who are too hot in Texas find their way up to the smack dab middle of Illinois for comfort.
Armadillos migration throughout the country because I've traveled for shows since 2002. I've driven to California back and forth multiple times. In the last probably decade, these things are everywhere. Missouri is covered in them. They're in my yard right now running around. Like, they're doing well for themselves. These cold temperatures are not a deterrent for that species at all.
So do they just go into deep burrows then in winter?
Not here. They're pretty much active all winter for the most part. I mean, I'm sure they'll probably burrow down in the really true cold days, but I don't know if I've ever seen one in the snow, but it also doesn't snow a lot here.
Their armadillos are a bit unique. Humans were fearful of them for so many centuries. Their body temperature is naturally reasonably cold. I want to say it's closer to about 90 degrees. Somewhere within there. And so certain bacteria and viruses kind of, they cohab with the armadillo. Leprosy is one. Leprosy can easily get passed from armadillo to person, and leprosy loves the armadillo because of its natural cooler body temperature. So I'm not surprised that they're out and about in your area in winter.
So I believe leprosy to be true because I know it's true. I don't know how many cases there's been, but I will admit I've picked up a lot of armadillos. When we're out herping, if we happen to come by one, I'll admit it, I'll chase it down and we'll pick it up and hassle it for a minute, not in a bad way, and then we'll let it go. They're quite docile, but their claws will open you up, and I've had bloody hands while holding them, but I've been okay. It's worked out. I'll never do it again.
Gotta risk it for the biscuit.
I guess so. I don't even take a picture, man. I just want to see if I can do it.
So is the ones you found with leprosy, you've never had any worries about getting it, Dave?
Well, I can't guarantee they had leprosy because they didn't give it to me.
That's just it. Leprosy just isn't so prevalent in the developed world, period, at this point. But we're talking about 1,000 years ago.
I think it
was a real problem.
Yes, I agree with that, and I'm not trying to encourage people to do it. I just don't think it's as common as people think. I think, don't you even have to ingest meat from it to possibly get it?
My understanding is skin to skin contact can do it.
Okay, then I've really just I got to stop.
I mean, I don't think leprosy is such a big deal. Modern times, the developed world. I think for the most part, the bacteria has been eradicated. I'm sure it still exists to some degree, but you just don't hear of people's noses falling off like they did so many years ago.
All right, I'm doing a little reading. It doesn't sound great. I might stop. At least wear gloves next time.
That's not a bad idea, even just for their claws. I don't know if they can get rabies, but it's a possibility, I'd imagine.
Yeah. So, and I don't know if these are bad things to talk about, but herping in Louisiana, I called it the Southern Hat Trick. I got a possum, a raccoon, and an armadillo all the same night.
I like that.
Well, you're not really doing anything bad. You guys are just taking pictures is the worst thing, really.
I'm going to take pictures, man. I just want to see if I can pick it up and there's a little pat on my own back and, leprosy.
Yeah, you guys aren't doing anything bad. You're not taking it to your house or anything that we know of, at least.
No, nothing weird.
So this is a random question I wanted to ask you guys before I forget. I don't think either of you have probably held back too many full litters of skinks, but have you held back enough where you realize, wow, I got a high percentage of males, for example?
I have not done that, and I can't say I've taken accurate enough records to keep tabs on my clients and record these metrics and analyze them. I can't say I have any experience at that level.
Yeah, I hold back stuff every year, but I usually find I end up kind of female heavy. I don't know what the reasoning for that is. But with your customer base and just, being able to keep an eye on them after they've gone, do you have any numbers on the amount of what the ratios kind of are, if they're leaning one way or the other?
I think it's about 50-50 from those that reach out. Hey, what's this in my tank? Congratulations. That's a boy. They're going to do this regularly, like any boy. And then, most of my clients, there's only maybe 3 breeders I sell to a year. 95% of my client base is the forever home. or even a pet shop that wants one or two for them to get the forever home. And so between sub males that don't drop sperm plugs and females, and then obviously the very visible dominant males, I can't say I have enough accurate records to make any assessment.
Fair.
The reason why I ask, it's, I'm assuming this one is random, but last year we held back all 6 from a litter, and it's looking like at least 5 of the 6 are male. The last one could be a male, but I'm not 100% sure, whereas the other ones we've bred or seen plugs from, so that's just a random occurrence where previously our first year we held back 6, and those were pretty random, but that was 2.4 out of 13, I think.
Do you have any suspicions that temperatures you set within the range, higher end of temperatures versus lower end, is producing more boys versus girls? Or do you feel temperature has nothing to play with it?
So, normally it seems like variable, normally, and we don't always keep a lot from the same, but this litter here was more like middle level, and they're all pretty standard temps. So, but that one bred later in the year is the only thing different that I could think of. But I wouldn't think that would factor gender.
I don't have an answer on this because I just don't know. I've never had them long enough to be able to do studies on full litters. I haven't always been able to keep up with the customers, so I couldn't even tell you over the years if I've made more of one sex than the other. And again, lots of different conditions. I just always find I end up with a lot of females.
Dave, I'm just noticing, sorry to change topics a little bit, are you wearing some Blazing Blue Tongues apparel?
Well, yeah, of course. It's the opening episode of the season. I gotta represent.
I'm surprised that I guess I washed my similar shirts a bit. Like, mine didn't end up lasting well. It seems like that one held up pretty good for you.
What are you trying to imply?
Either I wear it more or you have more of a variety.
How about this? I've worn it 3 times and I've never washed it. It's always getting out of the shower, doing this with you, putting it on and taking it back off, right back in the closet.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a forever shirt.
Well, that will definitely help where, like, a lot of stuff doesn't always come in extra large jumbo. So, when you get something you like, you wear it more.
Yeah, I'm a large. I don't know why you're even talking about extra large jumbos with me, man.
Me. When you're 6'4" and fat, not everything can always. You get a lot of plain shirts and stuff like that sometimes.
I have not had a tremendously good experience trying to, dive into the apparel route. I've got a great sticker supplier, and they could be a great magnet supplier. But in terms of apparel, I'd love to hear some either success or challenging stories you guys have had making attempts on that route.
A lot of the times we just mainly do it for us and never really here, I'm gonna try to put me on the main screen and I'll show you.
I like that hat.
We just got done by someone from Etsy, where previously, there we go. Previously,
are you to order, or are you holding on to your supply, your inventory?
So we just literally had we had 2 made, so we didn't really make a bunch. We could definitely look into that. The hard part, I'm trying to get you guys back on screen. Sorry. But like the shirts we've done for more of the like print on demand companies, and those ones you have better prices on, but doesn't look like the quality's the best on some of the hats I've seen. So I guess
payroll, it didn't work for me. Sorry,
I spent,
the hijack.
I spent all this time like designing the apparel the way I want, and then I connect with a supplier and I place an order on a few sample pieces, find out what I want, get everything going right, and then I'm having issues integrating their product model into my website. By the time I get it resolved, go back to the supplier, they can't supply the same quality anymore, and then I'm back to square one, trying to find a new supplier. They have different software on how to design the apparel, and then I'm back to square one on the design, and it was just this revolving door of a time suck without much to show for it.
Well, and that's I guess the nice part on this. You know, we just found someone on Etsy sent her a picture of the skink, and you know they printed on the hat and they sent it to us a week later. That's like $30 each, whereas not the most cost effective for like scale or anything. Whereas like I want to say it was Printify was the last shirt company we used to do the ones we have now, and those are order on demand, and those are pretty good. But just like everything, they got a variety of different stuff, so you'll probably have to pick the shirt you like.
Do you guys give out swag with every purchase, or is there a certain price point where you'll throw in a shirt for free?
So we don't have like any shirts on hand at all to do that. We do stickers and stuff, but
I do like them stickers.
Yeah, I'll do like care postcards and some random things like that. I really should do more. I don't know why, but t-shirts, I find that I'd sit on them for a long time and I'd just give more away. So it was more of a promotional thing. I've only had a few designs I ever thought would like be unique or like take off. And in the end, I printed like 12 of them, gave it away to my friends, and just never did it again. Sadly, I actually found this is like probably my favorite design I did or I had done over the years. And I had Emily Burke do it for me. I literally printed like 12 t-shirts and never did it again.
I like the BTS. It gives me very like retro 70s, 80s Kiss logo vibes.
That was the goal there, man. It turned out pretty. I was very happy with it. Like I said, that was Emily Burke. And I had a couple other artists in the hobby that I used for like some other designs. And like I said, I had a bunch of designs done, but the amount of money it would cost to get these big orders of t-shirts in, haul them around, hopefully somebody wants them. In my opinion, to do any kind of apparel in this hobby, you kind of have to be popular. Yeah. And if popularity doesn't come with it, people typically don't want your apparel. Sadly.
Yeah, that's kind of where we just, it's technically like you can get it printed, but end of the day, we just liked it for us. And if other people enjoy it, I do like your idea, Dave, on giving people out stuff, but yeah, then you need, 10 sizes from extra small to 4X.
Yeah, or you could just be greedy and go medium, large, and small, and tough shit otherwise. A few extra larges, let's be fair.
It looks bad when I can't even fit an extra large though.
Okay, well, you're not my demographic.
Well, that's the hard part with Husky in general, that not many.
Now I feel bad. I'm gonna get you a t-shirt. Like I promise. You just have to let me know your size again. You said 2 or 3.
Something with jumbo in there, I heard.
Yeah, extra large jumbo.
Maybe a small skink shirt.
Well, and that's the problem too. Like, I don't know how tall you guys are, but like I'm 6'4", so if it's too short, no one wants to see my ass hanging out. Or someone might, but most people don't.
It's fair. Maybe I'll make you a hat.
There you go. We'll
I
figure
got
it
a
out.
question.
What's that?
Oh, I have a question for Dave. Do you know, or I'm sure you've heard about RGI working on a test to sex blue tongues with a shed test?
Yeah, they reached out to me, and he reached out to me when they were in brumation, and so I was like, "Sit tight. I'm happy to help where I can." This is the second occurrence of somebody reaching out, maybe over the last 10 years, saying, "I'm trying to develop a sex test for blue tongues from shed skin." And I contributed some sheds to the first person who hit me up maybe 8-9 years ago. And to my understanding, they pursued this route with money and time for a little bit. And what are you holding up?
Oh, a shed.
Oh, okay.
I got
And
one.
they didn't make anything of it. And so I don't know if the gentleman you mentioned, whose name escapes me, unfortunately, if he is continuing on the work that had previously existed by the first mover, or he's doing something completely fresh. But I hope success for him, and if I can be of help, I'm happy to.
So there's multiple companies working on it currently.
Yeah.
RGI and then Genomics.
And that's Charlie, right?
Jeremy?
We might be confusing people, or maybe I got his name wrong. I know of a Charlie in the Long Island area that's doing this. He does a lot of the ball python shed testing with the gene sync, or is it
So phonomics, not genomics, but this one has more than one person, so one of them could live there. I'm not 100% sure on that.
All right. Well, Dave, where do you think that's going to come in handy in the hobby? Like, would that be something you use for all your babies? That's something you would recommend to your customers to use if they want to know?
Maybe at this point, I'm just interested in supporting people who want to advance the hobby. The cost of a postcard or a small envelope and submitting some shed skin, it's such a minimal investment for me to support their project. I'm happy to. And when the tests are verified and become available, we'll evaluate how I can take advantage of them. If they're charging $50 a service, maybe not. But at this point, in the trial and error phase, if they need me to contribute a 55-cent stamp and some free shed skin, happy to.
Same. I'm sending a bunch of samples into a couple people, see what happens. But like you said, over the years, Brian used to talk about having somebody who was utilizing for that. I think I've talked to Dr. Warren Booth about that over the years. There's been a lot of people, like you said, have brought it up like they can do it, but I heard it's not an easy test to create. I heard there's some inconsistencies there, so I'm hoping they can figure it out.
Speaking of kind of figuring things out on a scientific level, whether it's for blue tongues or any of your other species, have any of you looked into or considered using CRISPR to modify genes and get some type of super animal out of it?
I started bringing up CRISPR years ago on a podcast, and we talked about it on whether or not that could come to the hobby. And I think I kind of put it into the ball python industry, where I've known of ball python breeders that have imported unproven mutations from the wild for $100,000, and it ended up not being genetic. So I talked about it a little bit on the side of, what if we could take the blue gene out of the blue lobster, the crayfish, and put that into any species you want? Maybe there would be a patent you could have with that lab where they wouldn't recreate that animal for anybody else over a certain period of time. You get maybe 4 or 6 viable animals. And, if you have to pay a lab $100,000 to create a ball python mutation, other than taking a risk on a wild caught, I think there's actually some players in the community that probably would go that route. I do know down in what was it, Georgia, they made the albino anole through CRISPR technology. But I did hear that it did end up dying. But the T negative gene is always such a weak trait. I wondered if they pulled a different mutation out, they'd have more success. I know more, but that's just kind of some of the conversations I've had about it.
Yeah, Alex, you got opinions, or are you less versed in CRISPR and genetic modifying?
So I thought they were actually successful with it, but yeah, the hard part for them, you need the investment of big expense, whereas a lot of the stuff they're doing is known mutations, not making a super animal, I guess. Like they're taking mutations from others and adding them to it.
So, Dave, when you think CRISPR, we're talking like designing mutations. Are you talking about body structure? Are you talking about the size of litters? Like,
so I wasn't initially thinking pulling features or genetics from a totally different animal, but isolating and analyzing available genes within the sample you're working on. So I could, inflate the display of orange existing within the blue tongues, or maybe elongate the tail or the body to get a slightly bigger blue tongue and see if those types of genes can be passed on.
So those can, at least to an extent. I know, like we've done bigger and we've noticed smaller ones from a certain individual animal that continue smaller to an extent, but we don't want to take it too far, and then you're just we don't want to inbreed it too
you'll get the first dwarf blue tongue.
Yeah. Whereas like we got the one male I'm talking about, he's the baby from it. He's 14 inches as an adult and he's 3 years old.
Aww, that's pretty adorable.
He didn't bulk up, but that's the thing. You're not getting as big a head types. Whereas when you outcross it, you do. I'll leave him be. He's not in the best mood. But so some of that stuff you can, like I've noticed our first generation females, they had longer tails and we were able to pass that on through generations. It's been more so an accident than a focus.
So,
and does this come from you holding back full litters or being in touch with your clients where you can analyze this level of data?
And it's a small sample size from holding back multiple each year and then rotating them as we go. Like that first litter, we had 6 of the 13 we kept, so it's only half the litter, but it seems to pass on through the ones they produce, at least through here. I'm sure there's going to be a range, just like on anything, where some are going to be bigger and some are smaller.
With you guys also kind of being in the Midwest, and you guys have a bit bigger business than me, I always deliberately and strategically sell out, before winter hits, before brumation. But then I still get calls and outreach from prospective clients. Do you have anything available? I'd love one now. And as I explain to them, and maybe you guys can correct my thinking, even if I had something for you right now, it's 18 degrees outside, and I'm just not comfortable shipping a blue tongue in that weather, even with, a cryo pack or a heat pack. Do you guys feel safe and comfortable with your animals shipping them in peak winter season? Or is it not a much concern to you? You found ways around it?
Depends on the weather, the year, and probably it's probably not good to do anything around Christmas. But
yeah, I will say, because, with my old partner, our business was a lot bigger. And, we did year-round shipping, but we were also very cautious and paid a lot of attention to any little detail bad weather, like you said, any delays we've been seeing, holidays, of course. I think in the last decade, I've only lost one animal during shipping. Just it got delayed for multiple days, and it was in the middle of summer. Animal did show up dead. It was a ball python. Today was actually our first shipping day that we've had in over a month, just because there was a break in the weather, and we sent most of the animals that were going down south. And also, like, when you get your label made up, there's a certain code on there where you know whether or not it's going to Indianapolis or it's going to go to Memphis for sorting. That's something we pay attention to too, because certain times of the year we don't want animals going to Indianapolis at all. But I do a lot of shows also. So where you talk about, like, trying to have everything done by the fall or early winter. I will do some shows during the wintertime, and I generally do enjoy having skinks on the table when I'm at a show. A lot of times people don't get the opportunity to see that species in person. And I enjoy convincing people not to buy a bearded dragon and buy a blue tongue skink sometimes.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. But I do think you should be cautious. And honestly, I do think that, like you said, not shipping over those months is smart. A lot of times we'll sell, I think today we shipped out like 8 boxes and it was like 14 animals. Now, those were sales over the last 30 to 45 days that we just had to wait on. So, and we have a lot of other animals that we're still waiting on also. We feed them, we keep them comfortable till it's time. The customers typically have a pretty good understanding. Some customers will get a little pushy. They want it now, but we usually don't bend and break to customers' demands on that. It's animal safety first. If they don't understand that, like you said, maybe the animal's not right for them.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and one thing, like you mentioned, Dave, we try to, we've went more, I guess, small batch, less boutique, however you would call it, where we try not to have a ton left over.
Yeah,
Like
I always say with every species, if I can sell them before I make another one, I'm making just enough. If I have a ton left over when I'm already breeding the following year, I'm probably breeding too much of that species.
Have you noticed certain trends where an animal is hot for a few years and you build your inventory and your business around these market trends? And then there's a shift and you've got all these animals without enough customers.
Well, the biggest market trend that probably affected the skin community to all of us was not be able to export animals anymore. I think there was a misunderstanding about how many of the animals were leaving the country every year. And I think now we run into, I wouldn't necessarily consider it an issue, but, when we grew our collection up, I think at the most, me and Cheryl had about 200 blue tongues together.
Adults
We
or
broke up.
babies?
What was that?
Adults or babies
Those were
included?
adults. And now that was also back when we were exporting a lot of animals to Hong Kong. A couple of Clubrid buyers that I had over there were buying these animals. But when that resource went away, we definitely did downsize. Also, when we split up, we did split the collection down the middle. So right now, I think I have about 80 blue tongues, and I'll probably always keep the collection around there. And to be honest with you, some years I breed a lot of them. Some years we don't breed nearly as many. I always see how they look at coming out of brumation. And, I talk to Alex all the time. Some years I just have really lousy breeding years. Lazy males. I try taking males too far. So I haven't really been in a position where I've overproduced. If I did overproduce, I guess, like I said, as long as I'm sold out by the following year, I'll make that amount again. Otherwise, I don't know. Like I'm really torn on different things like Palm Street. That fast auction setting to sell an animal. I'm not sure how I feel about it yet. I do know, like I was watching one of JMG's recently, and it was very entertaining. Emily with Snake Discovery was one of the 80 people in there bidding. People were like talking together. It was a whole environment, but again, the pressure of buying an animal in 60 seconds, where I think maybe I might want to try skinks on there. I don't know if it's the right setting for skinks on that.
Yeah, I don't know how your feeling is, but at least for me, I do as much of an interview with the prospective client as much as they're looking into me. And, if the feeling's not good, I'm not hesitant to deny a sale, because ultimately my objectivity isn't to get rich, but to produce healthy, quality blue tongues and find them loving forever homes.
Yeah.
Obviously, I can't pay for somebody else's animal. I don't think I should be responsible for that. But to me, the home ranks above anything else.
With this species and any lizard species, really any animal in general, I do agree with you. That's the nice thing about doing shows. You meet the people face to face. You have a really good chance to give them an understanding of the species, some of the things to be careful about. That's the toughest thing about online. And again, with a species like blue tongue, I don't know if they're an auction setting species, in my opinion. I think most people that want a blue tongue don't really go to the auctions looking for them. But that was just me kind of spitballing what would I do if I ever produced. But also in that same thought process, I don't think it's auctions.
Doing shows and finding, maybe an impulse buyer is not the right terminology, because I'm sure there's plenty that have done their research and have the home set up. But do you ever feel like this person, this prospective buyer, is really piecing everything together so last minute, and maybe they're not well researched enough to guarantee the proper home and environment same day of purchase at the show?
So I will say this, and I'm sure you guys would agree. Skinks are very hardy species. If you get the diet dialed in, if the conditions aren't, not too much humidity, if you get it dialed in, and you can have them a little on the dry side, and they can do fine. I get a lot of people that have never even known there was a reptile show up with the family with the intention of maybe buying a corn steak or something else, but do fall in love with the blue tongue. Now, fortunately, a lot of the shows I'm at, there will be full setups at the shows that they can purchase that day. A lot of times, of course, at 2-day shows, I will encourage them to take the setup home that night, get it in order, come back the next day. I'll keep the animal at the show on heat. We run heat tape on our tables at every show. In the summertime, they blast the air conditioner. The wintertime, it's a cold building, I find. They hardly put the heat on. So leaving them with me the extra day, I always encourage them to do so. But, the reality is, like I said, people come to the show and some people don't even know about the species, and just their interactions at that moment makes them want the species. And I've also had situations where those animals have come home and I've shipped them out after they've come home, just because they wanted more time to get things situated. But, a basic blue tongue setup is not that difficult to my eyes. So, it kind of goes both ways. Like you said, a lot of times just that price point on the table is such a turnoff to them that the species probably wasn't right for them.
Yeah.
But also, where I talk about bearded dragons, the diet that goes into a blue tongue is far cheaper long term than what it is to buy dubia and crickets constantly for a bearded dragon. So where people can come to the shows and buy a bearded dragon really cheap, their long term bills with that animal will probably far exceed what it would be with a blue tongue.
Have you guys noticed on the keeping side of things, different expenses and different successes when it comes to heating, whether you're using heat tape or an overhead light and different types of bulbs? I've been using a bit more radiant heat panels. There's only one company that I like and trust when it comes to that type of product, but I have found it to be a lot more economical to do these one-time purchase radiant heat panels for their heat source, and they seem to enjoy basking in it.
So we switched to more of the overhead heat UV, and we chose those bulbs to make it easier with the setup. So like radiant heat panels wouldn't work the best. Definitely from a cost perspective, heat tape versus, a lot lower watts versus a 50-watt bulb. Heat tape's like 13 watts a foot.
I should know that, but I don't know that.
Well, it depends on, I think like 6 inches is like 13 watts a foot. So it depends on how thick it is too. But so it's going to be significantly less on your electric. But from a care perspective, it doesn't penetrate as far, but both do work.
So when I got into blue tongues, everybody was doing them in rack systems. A lot of people in Australia were. And I've always had just that 3 to 4 inch heat tape on the base. Right now, I am using the ARS rack systems that have the window on the front. It's a wider, larger tub. It's like the length of a CB70, but wider. And that was what my big upgrade was about 7, 8 years ago. I would like to change something where I could add lighting to it. And, me and Alex have talked about it a little bit, but, I would like there to be some exposure to UV with my females this year. I have had success over the years, but we haven't had any issues. But, after talking to the Florida guys, Don Patterson up in Canada talking about taking his gravid animals out just for that little bit of sunlight, like in the months that really are freezing cold. He thinks the babies do come out stronger. So I would like to try to find some kind of UV bulb I could add to the enclosure while they're gravid, but only for about 13 or 15 to 30 minutes of exposure a day. So what's going to end up happening is once I figure out the light bulb I'm going to go with this year, I will probably start my day by coming in, hanging 5 or 10 of these bulbs in a cage for a 30-minute timer, and I'll probably rotate it through the entire collection daily after my breeding season's over. And then I'll probably put a little more focus into the ones I know that are gravid until they give birth. So small improvement, but in the future, I will probably switch to cages.
So I do have a YouTube video out there on adding LED lighting to a rack system. Drilling in, kind of weaving it back and forth, making sure you've got enough slack to open up all the drawers and not have it interfere. And that was a really intense install, but it was one and done. And now it's been multiple years. Everything's still good. I know shortly after I installed it, Alex was asking, are those lights UV off-putting? And I said, no. I did like some heavy research on the LED lights, and I was most concerned with getting a waterproof one. And I was not finding anything UV. And at the time, you felt like UVs were either out on the market or they were in development and on the verge. Do you know of any update with, are you recalling this conversation we had maybe like 4 years ago?
I remember the conversation. For some reason I thought it was sooner, but
Maybe 3 years ago?
I know there was a company that was working on it, but I haven't heard of any products coming out. So I don't know if they had issues. They're Ryan McVeigh's company. I haven't seen much from them recently. Are they still around, Dave?
I don't think so. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. And I haven't done the research, and we talked about it a little bit, but the girlfriend has plants over the house, and she has those really thin strips in the kitchen that turn on for the plants, and they all lean right at them. Now, I do think there is some UV coming out of that, of course. And again, they're a very thin profile. So if we're talking about installing them to a rack system, it'd be very easy. But my conversations like Ryan McVeigh over the years, like we were talking like VivTech, if somebody could create a thin profile lighting to add to rack systems, that would probably be one of the most impactful products we've had in a long time, because a lot of people can upgrade their pre-existing caging compared to having to buy all new caging.
Yeah.
But, and like you said, I think there's a lot of easy ways to install it. It's just kind of a bitch, but when it's over, it's over.
Do you guys know any electrical engineers that would be worth talking to on that?
I don't, but when I was doing my research to figure out how to do the LED lights, it almost seemed like there was no instruction and everybody in the LED hobby already knows everything. And so you really got to find somebody who knows. Usually they're very warm and open about sharing their knowledge, but it's sort of like, what do you mean you don't know already? And as a non-electrical person, this was all new territory to me. And we went with a couple different, there's 3 components. There's the lights themselves, there's the power source, and then there's the dimmer control. And at any point, any of the three might not be made well and might not communicate, electrically speaking, with the other components. And there was a bit back and forth to find something that worked. But I did find that everybody in the hobby already knew way more than me, and there was also no instruction manual that was so sound.
So, one of the comments I've made over the years is that the saltwater fish community way more advanced than us with lighting, and of course the plant industry way more advanced than us with lighting. If there was a product that we could pull from that industry for ours, I think that's probably the best thing we have right now.
Do a lot. I know, like, they have lights for plants and stuff, but I haven't looked too much recently. Do they have anything super low profile that would work though?
In terms of like a strip, or is it still a hard case that you'd have to mount?
I think all the ones I've seen were more cases. I haven't looked recently though.
Yeah. So when I say thin profile for these ones we have on the plants, I mean like probably thickness, not even an eighth of an inch, if not just shy of an eighth of an inch. Width is about a quarter of an inch, and it's almost like those rollout strips.
Yeah,
Okay.
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you need. Something like that with UVB.
I'll stare at the product and I'll try to see if there's any information on it. I'll send it to you. We'll pass it back and forth. But that's one thing I stare at all the time. But it's not a matter of laziness. I just haven't done it yet. Some reason,
I hope you get it done. It sounds like you got the right lights, and more power to you to get it done. I hope you do. Let me know if you got any questions. I'm happy to impart whatever minimal wisdom I accumulated in my project.
Cool. Appreciate it.
So, talking trends, do you guys think like 10 years from now, the trend's going to be more genetics or polygenic, or who knows at this point?
I think it's more the pet trade. People that just want a pet they're going to love, and they're not so well researched or invested emotionally and in terms of the research on all these genetics. They just want a pet that they can bond with and they can love and take good care of. I feel like there's bigger trends, upward trends in the hobby in terms of care and ethical keeping and enrichment and spacious designs. And these are the uptick trends I'm noticing and really proud to see.
With those trends, do you think you're going to cut down more and increase size?
In a dream world, I've got a bigger home and a bigger budget to fulfill those wishes. I think for the most part, in reality, in terms of both the capacity I can deliver, I'm reasonably set, at least for where I'm at right now in life. Most of my enclosures are custom sized, roughly 60 gallons, but they're about 48 by 24. They're just a shorter, squatter profile, somewhere between 13 and 15 inches, and that allows me to stack about 6 high. I do have one rack for adults, but it's a really large rack. It's like a 55 by 30. It's actually my largest enclosure for the blue tongues. And since I was able to string and lighting for them, I don't consider it so much as a rack as it is just a really nice plastic tub. It's got windows. It's got view. There's enough space to make it spacious with decor for enrichment. And then the babies that I raise for the first handful of weeks, they're in a rack system, and that's really just the economics of the business. I wish I could give all those babies temporary housing in large, spacious enclosures, but I don't have the access to such an affordable warehouse, and I don't think anybody's going to pay me $1,200 for a classic Northern.
No, and kind of, I agree with all that. I do think the morph side, as we know now that they're actually becoming available in the United States, I think it'll be a decade plus before that's even a pet market priced animal, maybe longer. I know the price on the whites came down, but there was a lot of variabilities on that. There was a lot of unknown stock out there, and that did drive that price down fast. The moment Sun ends up in Petco like that, it's kind of a pet trade animal. And for the line bred stuff, I think similar to the crested gecko market and the bearded dragon market, those prices will fluctuate. I think years that we make a bunch of oranges, you'll see a price go down on oranges. The demand for reds will go up when there's no oranges. And I think we'll just always kind of see that. But I do think the species is a little more geared towards the pet market. I don't know what that sweet spot for a price point will be in the future. I don't. I think the 250 is what I see as a pretty common price right now for Northerns. I think is very fair. There is a part of me that would like to go a little lower because just to make it a little more affordable. But no, I think 250 is probably where they're going to stay for a while. I know we're going to see some at $200, but I'd say for your Northerns and really anything captive bred, it should always be around $250 for what goes into it.
I personally think even 250 is a bit low. I know, what my expenses are, especially when you get into, a 2-hour conversation with a client. It's a genuinely pleasurable conversation, but that's also 2 hours of my life. And I got 90 clients that year and 90 clients the year before. And, there's only so much time in the day. And I think we as quality breeders can deliver more value than a $200 or $250 price point.
I won't disagree. And depending on how many animals are produced in the hobby, it's I don't know. It's kind of tough. Like I said, I remember when skinks were 80. I remember then they were 125. I remember when they were 150. And it wasn't until, a decade ago when Brian Barczyk started talking to him that we saw the price go up. And if it wasn't for him talking about it, those animals might still be trading at $150 to $200 today or less. He brought a lot of eyes into the hobby, and a lot of people did purchase around that time. It's tough, man. Like I said, I hate turning a little kid away because they can't afford it, but it's also not meant for every little kid. Like you said, the environment it goes into, there has to be an expectation of what's going to go into that animal, and it's not just a cheap throwaway animal.
I agree.
Do you think to get that set price we want, we should go away from as many classics and continually increase the quality? The reason I asked, some people I've noticed throughout the years will pay more for an outcross or mix of lines, and they don't age as well, and they don't like that they paid the $600 to $800, for example.
What do you mean they don't age as well?
So a lot of times they'll not keep as much color with age and become more bland to look more classics. Some you don't see as quick, whereas some of them you could speed up the rate. It seems they gain their color from birth, so you start seeing them sooner, but also some of that is the increased quality.
I've definitely seen like a good mixed bag of these, great genetic, absolutely gorgeous babies slowly fade in time. And then these kind of nothing standardized classics, it came from my high orange male. And now in adulthood, these vibrant colors are popping you didn't expect or anticipate. And, to me, health is more important than anything when producing and delivering. But obviously, if we can get really colorful animals while maintaining health, to me, that's really exciting.
Yeah. We were talking body structure this week, just about, I've noticed in the early days of breeding the reds, we get a little bit of an underbite. And some of the other ones, my sunrises I find are very small compared to anything else in my collection. We, like I said, had the debate of how far is too much inbreeding for color before you need to take a step back to work on body structure.
And I was thinking about that some, Dave. I think what helped us, some of our founding animals, there are two that had that, but a lot of them were like 4 lines already crossed, but they still had a good like phenotype for the color. But there's definitely some fine tuning definitely helps, I guess be the way to put it.
So I don't know if there's any correlation here, but my biggest, strongest males with like the best body structure out of all the line bred stuff we do is probably the dark lineage stuff. A couple of the males we got from Diana a few years ago. I mean, these are a couple of those males that have that like really nice body structure I talked about. Just that really big head, good lean body, but muscular. Like I said, a lot of my reds are half the size of what some of my nice dark lineage stuff is.
Half
I
the
think
size.
I think part of that, some of Diana's were like starting off pretty outcross. Like the male I had from her, the ones I crossed to our oranges, our bigger early stock, those were, probably 2 feet easily, and they're super wide. Some of those we don't have, whereas even some of the ones we added more black kept decent size.
Yeah. Like I said, just those few animals I noticed compared to everything. Like I said, we just spoke everyone up today. I had a chance to go and look at every animal again today after having them down for a month and a half. Whenever I open up those males, like I said, I'll take some pictures for you. Just kind of explain what I see as like a proper body structure for like a nice strong male that should be a good breeder. And when I say half the size for some of the reds, definitely not talking length. On the scale, they're going to be half the weight.
Yeah.
Length, of course, they're going to be shorter, but like I said, these are just big, bold, strong-looking males. You can tell would just do very well in the wild.
Some of my outcross reds, I'll have to send you a picture, maybe measure it too. Like they're definitely, one of them's definitely smaller, but some of them are still pretty big.
Yeah.
I have a magma, and that one, it's a nice red, cherry red tone, but it has a little bit of that underbite. And I actually think it's kind of cute. It's never affected her eating or her life. And obviously, the goal is not to deliberately produce animals with an underbite or some other, abnormal characteristic in terms of the physical traits. But at least for something like that, it's not a spinal deformity. It's not something that impacts quality of life, and it's not so profound that has you going like, what went wrong there.
Yeah, I think again, I always do a lot of comparisons to the crested gecko community, but it was definitely a community that after a while with certain line breeding, you noticed a little bit of an underbite. It was very, it was not so much shunned, but like very looked down at. It wasn't really looked at as like something that people want to pick up investment wise or breed into their animals. But they also produce a lot more than we do. It's a much bigger part in the community to where with us having limited stock, we can't always be as picky. But in the future, if there was a lot more blue tongues being produced and sold in the industry, I could see the community caring a little more about those little underbites, as I guess. Just that alone, the underbite.
Yeah.
So I just noticed the time and it's starting to get a little late. One like final wrap up question. Like 10 years from now, what do you want your guys' role to play in the hobby? Do you want to stay where you're at, or?
I hope I'm still doing this on a hobby front because it means I've maintained my pets as my pets. I shrunk down a little bit last year. I hope not to shrink down more if I do, so minimally. The ones that I have, I've truly bonded with as a pet, and I love them, and I love being able to bring blue tongue life into this world, connect with quality forever homes, and get them their dream pet. These are opportunities in life that I feel good about. And so I hope to continue to be as big as Dave or even yourself. I don't think that's in my future, nor do I feel completely shutting down as well.
Fair.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with cutting down size. We're maybe by the end of this year we might be close to you. Maybe a little more than what you got, but we'll see how it goes. What about you, Dave? Other Dave?
Honestly, I'll probably still be in the hobby. I don't think there's anything else I'm qualified in life. We talk about this all the time. But I would like to do more videos, more interactive stuff. I would like to try to build the species up a little more, whether it's from the breeding side of it or just from the pet side of things. I think the thing that hurts the blue tongue skink community the most is that, I said it's a big, or Emily at Snake Discovery working with the species is a benefit for all of us. Her excitement while working with these animals is going to bring more people in. Yeah, I'd like to try to find ways similar to her without her popularity to, again, just show what the species can do from all sides. If I learn how to use a computer. Real iffy, buddy. Real iffy.
We got faith in you, Dave.
I don't.
All right, well, I appreciate you guys coming on, and we're at the best place if anyone's interested. Dave Skinks on Instagram and your daveskinks.com.
Thanks for the plug.
All right. Thank you guys again. You guys all have a great night.
Great chatting with you, Dave. Alex, I always appreciate you hosting. Thank you for producing this podcast. And everybody at home, have a great evening.
Awesome.